phone and then it was gone. Oh. Morning, Liza Jane.
Good morning, Courtney. Nice to see you.
I was like, who's that name? You got a new name today.
I do. What is it?
Kirk
Oh,
Lovett.
Scotland. I've been pirated. How do I change that?
If you go up to the name and right click on it in the participant list, you can give yourself a new name. Anything you want to be today.
Don't tempt me.
See what you creatively come up with. April, did you hear from Molly at all? Did she RSVP? I know she's got a heavy teaching load this quarter.
Any calves yet, Liza Jane?
Oh, Bruce, no, I actually sold my cows. I needed more time to
all of them?
All of them. Mm-hmm. Look at your face, Courtney. Yeah, it happened. I'm gonna pass.
Well, when you said you were selling, I didn't realize you were selling all of them.
I did. I still have a dozen bulls to sell, but yeah, I'm passing the torch. So
are the grandchildren nervous?
They should be. Yeah, good question. Yeah, they should be. I have little rods for them to put in their hands and off we go. So
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty big. We just sent out the news today. So but feels good. It's nice, sometimes in ranching, especially you ranch until you're 90 and then your kids are too old to want to take over. So I think it's pretty awesome to be able to kind of swap roles and support them and do what I want. So
that's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. I still have tons to do. It's not like it's just one thing off my plate. And the best part, whenever I get the blues, feeling sad about it, where they went is just amazing. They all went together. They're over in the Horse Heaven Hills. They're under circles and they're doing regenerative ag with them. That's what they wanted them for. And great spot. And they all went together. So it was too good to resist. So I let it happen. Yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing. I had no idea. Very cool.
Yeah.
And Lisa, is that you on the phone?
It is.
You have an unhappy computer this morning?
Very unhappy.
Well, I think we're all here. So good morning, everybody. And are we on YouTube, April? Oh yes, we are live on YouTube. I see the red button up there in the corner. So thanks, April. So this is the OWEB, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Environmental Justice Committee. This is the first meeting of the committee, and I'm Courtney Schaap, OWEB's Business Operations Manager and lead staff person for this committee. And The first order of business today is to elect a chair or co-chair. And then I think from there we will go through, well, maybe we should start off, Eric, by having everyone on the committee introduce themselves, and then we can go into the first agenda item. Okay. So why don't we have OWEB staff introduce themselves first, and then we will have the committee members introduce themselves. I'm going to mix it up today. Eric.
Good morning, everyone. Eric Hartstein, OWEB Board and Legislative Policy Coordinator.
Jesse.
Good morning, everybody. Jesse Kirschner, Water and Climate Programs Coordinator.
Lisa is having challenges, so she will maybe come back at some point today. April, you want to introduce yourself?
Good morning, April Mack. I am here for logistical support.
And April, just to say it out loud, do we have any public comments signed up today?
We have no comments today. No public comments.
All right, so I will pass it off to the board members to introduce themselves. Bruce, since you were the first to show up this morning, you could introduce yourself.
And good morning. I'm Bruce Buckmaster. I'm a member at large from Astoria, Oregon.
Thank you. Dan.
Good morning, all. Dan Shively here. I'm the non-voting board representative representing the USDA Forest Service in the Pacific Northwest region. Happy to see you all.
Liza Jane.
Good morning. I'm Liza Jane McAllister. I represent the public at large, and I'm from Wallowa County.
Ellie.
Good morning. I'm Kelly Coates. I'm the tribal representative on the OWEB board, and I'm coming to you from Jackson County.
And Molly.
Good morning. My name is Molly Kyle. I am the liaison from the Department of Environmental Quality. I'm one of the EQC commissioners, and I'm down here in Corvallis.
Thank you. And I think Lisa has joined us now.
Yeah, good morning. Lisa Sharplow-Hansen, Executive Director with the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board, and I am having computer technical difficulties, so I think I will just listen in today. How's that?
Great. Good morning. Sorry. So the first order of business for the board, OWEB board's new committee is to elect a chair or co-chairs. And so I would ask the board members if there is anyone that wants to volunteer to be chair or co-chairs, and then we would vote as a committee on that. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, I'll volunteer to serve as co-chair. I'd like to share the role. Thanks.
And I will volunteer to serve as co-chair with Dan.
Thank you both for volunteering and stepping up today. It's much appreciated. So I guess formally we will ask everyone to verbally say aye. So Dan can't vote for himself. He can't vote.
Aye.
Hi. Thank you, Dan.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys.
Kelly.
Fabulous. Check number one for the first of our new reformed OWEB board committees. And so what we wanted to jump into today, and we're not going to throw our new co-chairs too much under the bus today. Staff will definitely navigate us through the meeting today. Is we really thought it was important to start with all of our new committees and to hear from all of you what you would like to be the priorities of the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Environmental Justice Committee. OWEB staff definitely have some ideas and have some things on the agenda today that we think are really important for this committee to talk about and engage in. But we really want to hear from all of you. As we were setting up these committees, we identified this as an important piece of OWEB's work and want to hear from you about what you think the priorities should be for this committee as we meet over the next few months and as staff bring topics to you and prepare for these committee meetings and what we should be bringing to the board to discuss. So we'll capture all these notes today, and then we will summarize them and provide them so you can report out at the board meeting in April as part of the committee updates. So I think I'll just open it up now to see if folks have thoughts or comments. Oh, and we also want to share that now that we're up and running on YouTube, please don't put things in the chat box because the public can't see what's in the chat box. And so we need to verbally discuss things. Molly.
So one of the things that I would really like to see that would, I think, fall under this committee's role is OWEB provides tremendous resources for the state, but not every community might have the equal ability to access those resources, either through the lack of human capital or knowledge of the resources. So I would really enjoy seeing a concerted effort to make the resources accessible to kind of every community within Oregon. And that might be take the form of workshops or trainings or just kind of making sure people know these resources are available, how to apply for them, and then also what successful projects look for at the end. So a little bit of capacity building perhaps within that realm, with the idea that that would potentially remove a barrier for people to access, and we might get more applicants from different communities than we've had before. So see the material, see the resources used in different ways. So that's my first thought.
Other thoughts? Thank you. That was great. We appreciate that. Liza Jane.
Thank you, Courtney. This is Liza Jane. One thing that I think of right off the bat is continuing our education. Even though I missed the last one, I want to keep that in front of the board and our staff and just continue that work every chance we get, so that all of us, it's a big learning curve. And I think sometimes there'll be 8 hours of training and we think we're great. We've accomplished an understanding that's better than what we had. It is, but we need to keep going. And in addition to that, I think our role can be keeping DEI in front of OWEB in every single piece of our strategic plan, that we're kind of a backboard to that, making sure that each effort we make, we're always being as inclusive as possible. And then modeling that, finding opportunities to model that statewide. So I think we do a good job, but I know we can do better.
Thank you. Bruce.
When I read the agenda, I like both what Molly and Liza Jane were saying. When I read the agenda, I asked myself, and I think it's a question that maybe the committee needs to ask, what I wondered what a successful integration of DEI would look like to the committee and OWEB. And I broke it down into operations and grant making. And certainly I know we're doing a lot on the operations side with the work that Courtney's been leading. And I think that one is probably easier to define because we can do the training, have a finish point on training, and we can do a internal audit on how well we feel we're doing on the operational side. On the grant making side, both Molly and Liza Jane pointed out great things. I was looking at the outreach as well, and it made me nervous because I'm not sure we know who to outreach to, which is probably terrible English, but we may have to do an outreach to figure out how to outreach. There are groups. I mean, I like the idea of going to maybe county governments and at least letting them all know what OWEB's about and what we're looking for, and ask them to help us. But there are also a number of groups and throughout the state, both with a rural focus, racial focus, economic focus, that might have interest that would mesh with our the watershed partners we currently have. So until we know where we want to go, I think it's going to be a little difficult to come up with a list of things to get us there. And so this looked like an easy item number 2 on the agenda when I first read it. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, well, it's not quite as easy as maybe it looked at first. Thanks.
Kelly.
Yeah, so I agree with what others. So this is Kelly Coates, by the way. I agree with others what they've identified, and I think there's a couple. We could also probably break things into a short term and a long term, right? So in the near term, what we have on our agenda today with the outreach for Division 5 and then the outreach for the climate resolution, I think those are kind of near-term DEI needs to make sure we're reaching out to the right folks and getting feedback from them. So I think you guys are spot on with that. And then some of these other things may take a little bit longer for us to kind of flesh out. And so those may be a little bit more long-term goals, you know, having parallel tracks of moving forward and doing outreach while we're learning who we should be outreaching to at the same time, right? So I think we're going to have to kind of move forward with some things and just do the best we can while we're also learning. The other thing that I've thought about is the tribal assessment and outreach to tribes and getting feedback from tribes and kind of the next steps after that assessment. And it's kind of my assumption with the restructuring of the committees that it would probably fall to the DEI committee to look at that and help inform those next steps. So that's something I think that we need to think about and know that we'll be working with. And then I do want to stress with tribes and diversity, equity, and inclusion that yes, tribes are a part of the conversation with diversity, equity, inclusion, but there is that unique government to government relationship with a sovereign nation when we're talking about tribes. So it goes a little bit beyond some of the things that we're talking about here with DEI. Oh, and I also want to let folks know I have to get off at 9 for about 10 minutes and then I'll come back on.
Thanks, Kelly. And thanks for emphasizing the government to government relationship with tribes. It is, you know, a lot of our local partners will put tribal work within their diversity, equity, inclusion work because they are not a government entity, and we have to be really cognizant of that. And in many ways when we are trying to improve our outreach and engagement. If we are improving our outreach and engagement to underrepresented populations, we're probably also improving our engagement with our tribal partners. But we have to make sure that we recognize that it is a different relationship and has different responsibilities. So thanks for bringing that up. I think this is a great place to start. And of course, as we continue to work, we'll think about what the work is, how to break it into the short and long term. And I think it's a great lead in to Eric Hartstein talking about our Division 5 rules.
Great. Thank you, Courtney. So as a reminder, the board authorized rulemaking on OEB's grant program rules, which are the Division 5 rules, at the January board meeting. So staff are beginning the process to put together the rulemaking advisory committee to assist in the development of language for the rules. And we're starting out by getting assistance from OEB regional program representatives to get recommendations from their regions on what would make up a diverse RAC membership. So this would include good geographic representation, looking at the size and the capacity of the organizations that RAC members may represent. So, might have a small organization with a single staff member working on a really lean budget, or at the same time having RAC members with representing larger organizations with many funding streams and multiple staff. So we're also going to be looking at the type of work that organizations are involved in. So upland conservation, riparian or in-stream work, those that are doing a lot of community engagement, et cetera. As well as looking with the RPRs to highlight some groups from their perspective that may not have had an opportunity to engage in the past as much with OEB, and specifically with OEB rulemaking. So that's what we're doing with staff right now. And we're also drafting a letter that will be sent to tribes in order to invite participation on the RAC. And that letter should be finalized shortly. And we expect that the RAC will be put together this spring, and then depending on the extent of the rule changes, we'll meet into the summer and developing the final draft rules to be brought before the board for approval. So stop here and see if there are any questions or if there's any feedback that committee members might have. Bruce. Oh, you may be on mute.
I don't believe it's gone through the legislature yet, but it's still in the works. The environmental justice bill, and looking at their mapping tool, wondering how that might have overlap and involvement potentially for our rulemaking. So has that been considered? Is that something you've looked at? And do we need to make allowances for that potential in the rulemaking planning?
Thank you, Bruce. And you're skipping ahead a few items in the agenda too. So we do have a little bit of that legislative update. And that was actually the bill that I wanted to bring before the committee, was the Environmental Justice Council and the mapping tool. And part of the, if the bill does become law, that it would, the Environmental Justice Council would be available to natural resource agencies, which OEB would be a part of, because the bill amends the environmental justice statutes to include OEB as a natural resource agency in environmental justice. So we would be able to go to the council if we had questions in developing policies or rules, as well as utilizing the mapping tool that the council would be developing. I think that the actual development of the tool will likely run out beyond where we're looking to have the final rule language adopted for Division 5, but certainly for future OEB rulemaking endeavors, I can see that mapping tool, playing a critical role.
And Liza Jane, if you'll let me do a quick follow-up. Also, as I've been trying to pay more attention to these things, are we in a position where we would be able to remunerate, RAC participants for their time? Because that seems to be one of the issues on accessibility to under DEI for BIPOC communities and other communities, getting the right as broad a representation as possible on the RAC committee might require us to at least having that option available.
Yeah. Thanks, Bruce. I think that's good feedback, and we will look into that. Liza Jane.
Thank you. It's Liza Jane. I don't know how to raise my technical hand, so I can do this one. One thing I've been noticing in my involvement with meetings and Zooms and wherever, it's so heavily weighted with agency people. These decisions we often seem to be going to, and when we do the big introduction of 30 people involved, often I'm the only person that doesn't, in my ag place, I'm the only private industry or the only person that's not representing an agency. And I think to Bruce's point, how do we make that possible and make sure that we're getting a voice of people that are not part of that way of moving forward? That group think is to get the individual who's representing other individuals is really important. And I think it's lacking. So I hope that we can do that in each division, ask our regional reps, who might be out there that would apply for a small grant or would fuel the energy better. So I wanted to add that, Eric. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Lisa?
Thanks, Eric. So I have a question back to Liza, Jane, and Bruce, I think, around this. I appreciate the comment about being heavily weighted with agency people. When you say that, just for clarity for me, are you thinking also in terms of like association representatives rather than actual ag operators, et cetera? Because many times associations will represent, I think, the operators rather than an actual operator themselves on many of the RACs that I've participated in the past.
Lisa, thank you for that question. This is Liza Jane. I think independent individual people that are on the land, we want to be working with private landowners. And so we need to do whatever we can to hear from private landowners. And often those people are not part of maybe the stock growers or, maybe the Audubon. I don't know. But if we can do both, it's great. Even I've noticed, Lisa, when people are speaking and sharing in a group, they're still doing the agency position, which is great. It's important, but I want to make sure that we are hearing from everyone, and they may not be part of an organization. Their work may be. Is that clearer what I'm trying to say? Okay.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's helpful feedback for us.
And Lisa, I'll just say that I've had the same experiences outside of the ag group where it is not unusual to be at a meeting. And I've asked more than once, am I the only one in this meeting who isn't being paid to be here? And so while there may be organizations that are represented, lobbyists, executive directors, as good as great a job as they do for their organization, they're often doing it for the most powerful segment of their organization, and then a portion of their membership or people who choose not to be members in the same industry are not represented. So I think what Liza Jane was saying is very important, and making sure that we have no barriers or actually do something in a positive way to encourage participation to a level that generally has not been happening, I think might be an opportunity for us to actually advance DEI at OWEB.
Thank you for those comments.
Lisa, I want to add to this, Liza Jane. I keep thinking about and not saying like getting young people, like college, even high school, that kind of, I see that missing as well. And so that I'm in a position of passing the torch, I'm thinking about how do we keep this going? How do we continue and get that valuable, fresh perspective, and I think we can maybe do better there too. So many ways to be diverse, and it's well worth the effort.
Great, thanks for that, Liza Jane. Are there any other questions or feedback from the committee on this topic? Okay. Not seeing any. Thank you. Thank you. This is great. Really appreciate it.
Still your show, Eric.
Still okay. We're going to roll right into the next agenda item, which is an update on the climate resolution outreach. So this is one that Jesse and I are going to tag team a little on. So to start with, OWEB staff have begun to scope out a public outreach approach for the climate resolution that was adopted by the board at the January meeting, and specifically how it may inform future rulemaking on evaluative climate criteria into OWEB grants. So to begin, Jesse and I will be providing a presentation at a March 15th Oregon Conservation Partnership webinar, where we will be providing some background on the resolution and letting folks know how they can provide feedback to OWEB. And so that will really kind of announce what our outreach strategy is, which will include hosting 6 virtual public listening sessions beginning in April. And we're looking for these sessions to be externally facilitated and really have a kind of a soft focus on each of the 6 OWEB regions. So as the listening sessions are going to be virtual, we would welcome any participant from any region to join in any of the sessions if they cannot attend the event in their region. And at the same time, we're also planning on developing a short survey for those that either cannot attend a listening session or do not feel comfortable providing feedback in a public forum. And with that, I'd like to actually pass it over to Jesse to describe our other outreach we are planning on the climate resolution.
Thanks, Eric. Good morning, everybody. This is Jessie Kirshner again. So Eric mentioned earlier with the Division 5 RAC that there's going to be a letter to tribes. So as part of that letter, we have included an update about the climate resolution and the public engagement process. So we are inviting tribes to participate as they would like in the public listening sessions, but we are also planning on hosting a tribes only listening session. And we will be inviting, I think they're down to resources staff and others from the tribes and working with Ken Fecho and then others at OWEB to identify those different tribal representatives to invite. We're also in the spirit of trying to think about the non-traditional partners that we haven't typically engaged with. Our DEI contractor, Echo Northwest, is planning to conduct interviews with non-traditional partners. So we have had some conversations with them about adding questions related to the climate resolution to those interviews. So we don't want to be, asking people to have multiple interviews with us and with our contractor about OWEB. And so trying to really find ways to streamline and, make efficient use of people's time. And so we figured that's a nice way to do that. And then we're also working with the regional program representatives on identifying folks in the implementer or contractor community. So what we'd like to hear is input from those people that are working on the ground, the contractors on this climate resolution and some of the considerations. So that's another aspect. This is a group we haven't traditionally engaged with, but would like to get their feedback on the climate resolution. And I think we didn't mention it earlier, but for the public listening sessions, the groups that we've identified for inviting so far, obviously current grantees, but also county and local government, our regional review team members. We'd really like board members to attend. I'm trying, let's see, Eric, am I forgetting anybody else? We have some other folks on the list too, I think, but we're starting to develop out who those different, a pretty big group of people that we'd like to invite to those public listening sessions. So with that, I think we can take questions. Bruce?
Thanks. That seems like a great plan, and it's going to get us certainly to all of our usual suspects and expand it beyond that. I still am a little, I want to do, I'd love to see a little more happening on how we try and generate some interest outside of our usual partners or identified partners. I think we're on it. I was curious whether or not we had done anything with a press release of the first resolution that OWEB had done. And within that press release, maybe some information about why people are always looking for money. People are always, there are lots of groups getting it out. So I'm supportive of everything you guys have just talked about, but wondering if we can somehow shake the bushes a little more in a way and just see, put it out there and see if we get some interest coming back in from some unexpected places in Oregon.
Thanks, Bruce. I see Lisa, you put your hand up, so I don't know if you had a response on that or.
Couple of things. So I think staff didn't mention, we've also reached out to the governor's office through Amira Streeter to look at how we might engage with the Racial Justice Task Force to get some feedback and continue to identify new partners along the way. And then also Stephanie Page and I met with the Enterprise Equity Officer about 3 weeks ago, talking about how we might begin to build relationships in some communities that we haven't traditionally had in the past. I don't know if April is on. I believe we did work on it wasn't a press release, but it was a notice that we sent out on our Gov Delivery that goes out to all of our partners, which could include press as well.
Yeah, we have that Gov Delivery went out, and I believe there's several thousand people that subscribe to that Gov Delivery notification. I think Dan and then Molly.
Thanks, Eric. Yeah, the listening sessions would begin in April. Is there a schedule set? Yeah, or is that still in development?
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, the schedule for the listening sessions is still under development. We're going to be working with an external facilitator, so we're going to try to work with their schedule that we're looking at. April and May is sort of our preliminary schedule for the listening sessions.
And just to build off of that, we've also talked about some potential evening and weekend listening sessions, again, to think about implementers, think about people that are in the field all day working, and how do we provide them opportunities to engage that fit into a greater diversity of schedules. Sorry to jump ahead of you, Molly.
Excuse me, I was sneezing. And Courtney, that was actually going to be my comment. I think this provides a great opportunity to maybe look very carefully at the outreach plans, because I do know it's always kind of disappointing when you do schedule outreach and nobody shows up, which is common. But I think there's some barriers in there that are that we can address, whether it's the timing. People who work are not going to engage. Doing it during pickups and drop-offs from school or during dinner time, you immediately eliminate families. Geographic representation of where these meetings happen, even the timing of meetings if it's conflicting with other events. So I guess a question that I do have back perhaps towards Lisa and staff is, who do you want to make sure sees this climate resolution, because it's important work? And what strategies will you do to try to make sure that this gets in front of them so that they do have the opportunity to meet? And one size is not going to fit all. So sometimes tacking these on to events that you know your stakeholder groups are going to is the most efficient way to kind of make sure that people are there. So I don't know what events are going on that would be attached across the state that we could piggyback on. But that usually works really well. And then also, that would be Murphy. And if, and apparently somebody's intruding in the neighborhood. And a lot of people, especially if you're trying to get representation from tribes or specific communities of color, they're being asked to do this for everything. So making sure that you're compensating their time is also an important incentive. So it might be time to kind of take off the outreach and engagement plan and shake it off and see if we can insert some of these different approaches in order to make sure that we're doing the best we can to put the information in front of the public that we want to see it.
Lisa. You may be on mute. So maybe while Lisa's getting the technical difficulties sorted,
Liza Jane has her hand up. She can't figure out how to raise it.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Courtney, for that. I'm trying. This is Liza Jane. And everybody has said what kind of Molly and Bruce, what I wanted to say, but for some reason, I still want to say that when I see that a meeting is scheduled at 7 a.m., that's a perception backed up with an action that says to me, you acknowledge that that I'm not on the payroll for this meeting of anyone, and you've made an extra effort to include me so that you acknowledge, my day starts, it's full, and all the things Molly said. That's so critical to all the work that we do, and it's hard to try and fit all that in, but it's the only way that we can model what we believe. So thinking outside of the norm will help us increase our outreach, especially. So that was said well. I just was burning to say it again. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Liza Jane. On the kind of the piggybacking idea, one thing that we are taking advantage of right now is with the Oregon Conservation Partnership. They've been very gracious in allowing us to schedule with them with their regular monthly webinar series that I mentioned. So here in a couple of weeks, when Jesse and I kind of kick things off with, this is, granted, our more traditional partners, but it does include both the large capacity organizations and maybe the smaller watershed councils and soil and water conservation districts that regularly tune in to these webinars. And Lisa, I see that you're not on mute now, so maybe you could give it a go.
But there's no phone next to her name. I don't think she has any sound now at all.
Okay.
Well, but Kelly has her hand up.
Hi, everyone. Kelly Coates. I'm back. So I think it's really important with these listening sessions that we get the folks that we have heard from the most after the last couple of board meetings that are really tracking this and may have some concerns about that. And that's a lot of our watershed council folks. And I think making sure that we're getting that outreach to them on the listening sessions is really important, because I know that they really want their voices to be heard on this. They're the ones doing the implementing, and they're the ones that are having concerns about whether or not they're going to be able to tweak operations enough to meet the needs of the climate resolution. So just wanted to throw that in there because I think it's really important.
Great, thanks for that, Kelly.
It was this, yeah. So.
We can hear you now, Lisa.
That's good. I'm having more technical difficulties today than I have had in 6 months. So that's, just laugh with me. I'm going to laugh about it. I couldn't even get my phone to go off mute or to hang up. I don't know. The screen just quit working. And I don't remember what I was going to respond to. Molly had asked a question about involvement, I think, before I got flustered. How's that?
I think what Molly articulated so well was, who do we want to get this climate resolution in front of? And then who are the people that really, like Kelly said, the folks that have voiced concerns. who are the people we need to get this in front of, and then what mechanisms are we using to make sure it gets in front of them?
There was another mechanism, I think, too, and people talked about compensating people. I know that we can compensate expenses, so travel time, and if it's, you know, the expense part of it. What I need to look at is how we might compensate actually for time. And I think the Oregon Department of Transportation has a model that they've been using to be more inclusive and to be able to bring people in. And so we'll go search some of that down to see what might be there to try and eliminate, you know, that barrier. The other thing I was going to mention, one of the groups that I think, you know, we're trying to get in front of, and staff mentioned it earlier, are the implementers, the people that are doing the work on the ground. As we talk about the climate and the potential for different types of equipment needs with less emissions, how does that impact the implementers? Because they're the ones that need to figure it out, and what are there barriers, aren't there barriers to some of the different equipment needs, or the ways that people might need to do work that might be more climate friendly, because we haven't had necessarily their input at the table. It's come from the partners that are grantees. And so really trying to get to those people that are actually doing the work this time, I think, is another strategy that we're taking very seriously.
Okay, let's go Dan and then Bruce.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. Great conversation, everyone. I too am challenged learning the buttons and the dials on Zoom. I don't use it as often as other platforms, so I think I've got my hand lowered. You know, what Bruce said earlier really stuck with me, and that is having a sense of how we're performing. How is OWEB performing? And what are we aiming for? So as we talk about, you know, the need for thorough outreach and engagement with key communities, it really feels as though we don't have a good grounding on what the, you know, as a scientist, kind of what the sampling framework is, so we can ensure that we're, you know, adequately sampling, adequately reaching the critical communities, to ensure the interwoven and interconnected components of environmental justice with climate change work. And so I just wanted to call that out. And I think at times we think we know, we think we try things. It reminds me of a recent article I read in Harvard Business Review, where we operate on assumptions often, and we don't test and check those assumptions. And we may be operating with the very, very best intention, but we could be falling way short or off the mark with what we think our target is. And so, yeah, just to acknowledge that, to have awareness around that, and to, you know, think about the work of the committee, both in the short and the long term, of trying to grow a better understanding and awareness around this need. And I'm not familiar with the concept of the mapping tool that I heard mentioned earlier, but it sounds like that could be a real critical piece of filling in some of these unknowns, some of these gaps. Thanks. Bruce.
Yeah, thanks. I had three things regarding this outreach. One is how do we make sure that we are communicating to non-traditional community-based organizations? Where do we find that information? And to at least allow them to know what we're doing, so that they can refer it if they see a fit. Secondly, I think we need to address, and this is a staff issue that I trust is easy to take care of. Who are our contacts within the OWEB family, OWEB staff? making sure that they have all the training they need to talk to somebody with absolutely no knowledge other than maybe reading a press release or hearing about the climate resolution, saying, hey, I don't know if this fits. So making sure that Jesse, Courtney, Eric, whoever, or usually more than one, feels comfortable with their training, that they can deal with somebody with a virtual zero amount of information and moving forward. And the last is, there are the groups in Oregon, Oregon Global Warming Commission, Environmental Justice Group, ODFW, and I'm sure there are many more that have done listening sessions, have done outreach. They have lists. To the extent that we can get that interagency cooperation, get all those lists, everyone available, and get it out there. We can't get in trouble by telling too many people about this. So that's all.
Great feedback.
So Bruce, thanks for that. We'll do some more of that. We have done some of it. We've reached out to a couple of agencies that we know had done some really great outreach recently. DLCD is one of them, and I think Jesse is scheduled to meet with the Department of Energy because they've done some really great outreach around some issues recently as well. So thank you for reminding us about that. But just to let you know that we have started some of it.
Molly, I see your hand up.
Yeah, no, thank you. So this is Molly Calla for the record. I appreciated Lisa's comment there with regards to trying to get this in front of the people that are doing the work. And I appreciate that Eric is emphasizing that this is going to be working with our traditional partners, but which is so important. And I think what you guys do really well. I think the challenge that I might put out there a little bit is, what about our non-traditional partners that are also doing the work and trying to develop strategies for that? So I always appreciate Liza Jane's comments about, you know, a lot of this work happens on private land and trying to get landowners involved. So I think Liza Jane and other members at large have a really good idea, maybe how to reach private landowners and ranchers, who are some of the busiest people on the planet, with regards to their normal work. And maybe there's places where they congregate that we could shoulder onto. A lot of the work of the restoration is also contractors and construction workers, and they have labor unions, they have training halls, and they have professional organizations, which I've used in public health and occupational health and safety quite well, to be able to swoop in where they're all gathered and just kind of tack on to, you know, if the roofers are there learning how to do a skill. Hi, I'm the public health person. Can I teach you about PAHs and safety? You know, so there's opportunities there as well to get it, maybe perhaps some of our non-traditional partners, and whether that's just you want to raise their awareness of what is going on or raise awareness about opportunities coming down the pipe. Because we have had a lot of conversations about greenhouse gas emissions from the actual construction of some of the restoration. And the only way we're going to be able to move that needle is if the people actually doing that construction labor get on board with more green construction kind of equipment and diesel emissions and things like that. And then the last thought I had is a lot of people reach out to OSU Extension because they have a tremendous reach around the state. So again, even if it's trying to get a little article in their newsletter, people read that. Or if you're thinking that you want to reach out to 4-H clubs or master gardeners or all of those things that go with that, it's a great resource as well. And people read it. It would be a trusted partner that I think would be very sympathetic and very complimentary to a lot of the great work that OWEB's doing.
So Eric, can I ask a question? Again, for just more clarification, because this is a really helpful conversation. You all have brought up some really, really good ideas. And so one of the questions that I was thinking about, we've talked about reaching non-traditional customers. I'm now thinking it's people that I had thought might have been traditional customers, and maybe it's more that one-on-one, two individuals that would have the work done on their properties. Because we have our core group of associations, right? I think I talked about that previously, that we work with, and you guys know the partners. We hear from them at many of our meetings. I don't know, and definitely can do some work on this, is to really understand if when you talk about their membership, how much they know about OWEB and OWEB's work. And so there could be opportunity too for us to, as Bruce said, get out where they congregate at some of those annual meetings. I actually have been invited to attend a couple of meetings of organizations that we normally wouldn't partner with or interact with recently. And now I'm thinking, I had put one on the schedule and it wasn't until fall, but there are a couple more in different regions coming up, over the late spring and summer. And maybe just spending some more time out with people too in some of those places might be helpful. So I'd like some feedback on that in terms of an idea for, continuing the DEI work. Yeah, Liza Jane, please.
I think Kelly's in front of me and I'll follow her. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, Liza Jane. If you were going to respond to Lisa, go ahead and do that, and I'll just hold on.
Well, she led me into my comment pretty good, so I'll do that. And that is, has OWEB ever done any listening sessions on how we should do our outreach? Like, have we measured or asked people, how do we do a better job of inclusion out into communities in Oregon? Maybe what Dan said about making assumptions from our own place is a barrier to us. And maybe we could ask, Lisa, what you're saying, maybe we ask people for their feedback so we can learn better how to do outreach to underserved folks and people that aren't at the table. I don't want to add work, but I think that might, as a committee, be a project that we could take on in finding out how, when, and where we could improve.
That's an excellent suggestion, Liza Jane. Kelly.
Thanks. I fully agree with Liza Jane. I think that's a great suggestion. And I think something that I think a lot of us inherently know, but also that we're learning in our training, right, is to ask the question first and then really listen, right? So I think that's a great idea. I was going to say, as far as outreach to tribes and other maybe state agencies, a really great platform, and you guys probably already have this as something that you're going to do, but I thought I would just bring it up anyway, just in case, is the Natural Resources Work Group that Ken is the liaison for. So he can bring this up at the next Natural Resources Work Group meeting, and then it'll get out to all the tribes as well as all the state agencies. So that will do pretty broad outreach there. And then maybe some of the other state agencies can also take this and kind of put it out broadly to their groups. And the other thing I was going to say about, our traditional partners, our watershed councils, our implementers out there, is that from what I'm hearing from some of our watershed council folks is that they are already having conversations with their contractors about how we move forward into more climate friendly operations. So I think there's going to be a fair amount of outreach from the councils and the folks that are using the contractors themselves to talk about this and what they see kind of coming down the pike. And so I think that's another avenue to kind of spread the message out a little bit further to the folks that need to hear it.
Yeah, fantastic. This is great feedback. I think we're all taking notes. So I really appreciate this. Is there any other comments, questions, concerns on the climate resolution outreach at this point? Okay, great. Well, again, thank you so much for that. And I guess I could just roll Courtney right into legislative. Okay, so we've brought it up previously. Really it's been an eventful legislative session that will be ending by this Monday, and really to kind of focus for the purposes of this committee, it's really that House Bill 4077 that probably has the most relevance to this committee. So as I mentioned earlier, that if it passes, would add OWEB as a natural resource agency to the environmental justice statutes. It will rename the Environmental Justice Task Force to the Environmental Justice Council and establish that council within the governor's office. The council would have 13 members appointed by the governor who would represent minority communities, low-income communities, environmental interests, industry groups, and geographically diverse areas of the state. So as I mentioned earlier, among the duties of the council would be to identify environmental justice communities, and on the request of a natural resource agency, provide some consultation and review of agencies' proposed policies and administrative rules. And the council would be responsible for, and this would be really working with natural resource agencies, and in particular DEQ, for the development of that environmental justice mapping tool. So the tool itself would be developed through a public process, as kind of described in the bill. So it's not really prescriptive on exactly what the mapping tool would entail, but it would be detailed enough to allow for the assessment of environmental justice benefits and burdens, as well as including geospatial data layers to better understand the nature of environmental justice communities. And ultimately, that mapping tool would be available on the Oregon Explorer website. So anybody in the public would have access to it. And that once it's complete, that natural resource agencies would be able to use the tool to help identify who are environmental justice communities and conduct the very engagement activities that we're just talking about with those communities to assist in the development of agency rules or policies. So one other, I think, key aspect of this bill as it relates to OWEB would be that as a natural resource agency in the environmental justice statutes, it would require the agency to create a public advocate position that would encourage public participation and ensure that our agency considers environmental justice issues. And then just as a quick update, the bill did pass out of the House side of the legislature yesterday with bipartisan support, and it will now be moving over to the Senate in the next few days for consideration. So I'll stop, see if there's questions on that. Lisa Jane.
Thank you, Eric. Can you give me the definition of an environmental justice community?
Yes. So in the statute, I'll read it out here for you. So the environmental justice community includes communities of color, communities experiencing lower incomes, communities experiencing health inequities, tribal communities, rural communities, remote communities, coastal communities, communities with limited infrastructure, and other communities traditionally underrepresented in public processes and adversely harmed by environmental and health hazards, including seniors, youth, and persons with disabilities.
The entire state?
So it's broad.
It's broad, yeah. Wow. Okay, thank you. Helps me.
Yeah, Dan.
Thanks for the overview, Eric. Yeah, I'm learning as we go, and it's too much for me to track individual legislation at the federal level, let alone the states, both Oregon and Washington. What are the other state agencies that are called out in this House bill? And you made mention twice, I think, to it would direct the agencies to fall under a set of environmental justice rules. Could you elaborate on that, or maybe I characterized it incorrectly? Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So there's already a set of agencies that are defined as natural resource agencies within the environmental justice statutes. So that includes forestry, agriculture, water resources, ODFW, state lands, and Marine Board, Department of Land Conservation, and DOGAMI, so Department of Geology. And this would be then adding state parks, the Department of Energy, and OWEB to those statutes. So they already exist, and they would just be expanded, the list of natural resource agencies. And then there are those requirements that natural resource agencies have under these environmental justice statutes, including that public advocate position. And then the use of the mapping tool and reaching out to the council, the Environmental Justice Council, would be kind of at the discretion of the natural resource agencies. It wouldn't be requirements, but they would, the council would be of service, I think, to the natural resource agencies. Okay, other questions? Great. Okay, well, we will.
You want to talk? You want to talk budget?
Lisa, why?
Do you want me to talk budget?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead and talk budget?
Okay. So we're still in the throes of it, but there are several things that have been discussed in terms of additional resources coming to OWEB. You may remember we had asked for an outcomes specialist. I'm feeling that it's likely we will get that position, which is terrific. We had asked for some additional resources to round out the drought package that we received in December. I'm feeling it's likely we will see that as well. We also made a request on behalf of the Wildfire Recovery Group for $5 million plus some admin for the 2021 wildfires. That I think is still in the mix. There is the Oregon Ag Heritage Program has had a really strong stakeholder group working to get funding for the Ag Heritage Program put into OWEB's budget. That is the possibility of about $5 million for the Ag Heritage Program. And then additionally, there has been a lot of work by advocates to add additional dollars into OWEB's budget for water acquisitions. And right now, what has been talked about is $10 million for water acquisitions coming to OWEB. Again, there are some staffing resources that have been asked for to go with these packages. In the early conversations, I think right now it looks like potentially they would be limited duration positions. So one of the challenges I think we're looking at as an agency is there's another very large body of work coming to us without permanent positions. Some of the money is going into funds that we have and will stay in place. And so we'll be able to request limitation and staff suspended into the next biennium. Some of the general fund that's coming to us, though, needs to be spent by the end of the biennium, or we'll have to request carryover, and that'll be a legislative decision to see if that would move into subsequent biennia. So there's a lot of moving parts and pieces right now. It's over or close to $20 million. That is additional funding that potentially could come here with new work along with it. I think one of the things I would mention to you that we're all on the executive team really looking at is our structure in terms of management and our capacity to be able to get this out the door with bringing new staff on and needing to train them. And do an adequate job of oversight in moving this along. It's definitely a big body of work for us. And so we're spending some time trying to think about how we might do that. I think the other thing I would mention to you, and especially based on some of our conversation today, we'll be coming to the board in April with some ideas in terms of what we might ask for in an agency request budget. And given our conversation today, I think we really need to think about outreach and communications and some more resources in that area, specifically dedicated to some of the work that I hear from all of you is really a priority in terms of equity and inclusion, and thinking about how we might better do that work in a more intentional way. I think it's going to take some additional resources into the future. So just a couple more things for you to think about kind of in that budget legislative realm, and to give you a sense of what's coming at us, along with the new and enhanced initiatives that we have with the board that we want to move forward.
All right, so any questions for Lisa? The last thing on our agenda for today is just to see if all of you have any feedback on the trainings that we've done with Eco Northwest. We will be, there's another
Hey, Courtney, we lost sound with you.
Can you hear me now? All right, my headphones maybe have just died from overuse this week. So we're just interested if the board has any feedback to Eco Northwest. We've gone through 2 trainings. We have another training scheduled with the board for April 7th. And then either the 26th or 27th of the board meeting, there'll be a joint training with the board and staff. They're going to be bringing environmental justice groups together to come speak to the board and staff. And in order to be respectful of their time, they've asked that we bring board and staff together for that training. And it is built, I just wanted to share, I thought this was good. You would all appreciate this. It is built into the contract that they are reimbursing these partners for their time for presenting to the board and staff as part of the contract. And it was one of the reasons we thought we selected them, because we appreciated how they are engaging with our non-traditional partners. So just any feedback from any of you about the training, how it's been going, that we can share with Eco Northwest as we continue down this path? Great.
I'm really
Go ahead,
Courtney,
surprised.
yeah. Can I ask the committee another question? Another thing that struck me as we were talking, we tend to use the board, I think, as your advisory test in terms of you make decisions as well as advisory around this area in terms of DEI and outreach. I'm wondering if there's a need to set up an outside advisory committee that we might tap into, some organizations to help us expand our reach and provide us some more feedback that would be feedback to the board and to the agency in terms of operations. Any thoughts or reactions to that? Yeah, Molly.
Yeah, Lisa, I think that's an interesting idea and something that should be pursued. But I do think there needs to be a preceding event, which is have the OWEB, you and your team kind of get together and think about, because I think 2 parts. I think you do really good outreach with your traditional partner. And you've got a really nice group of people that work with OWEB. So it's maintaining those relationships for sure. But it's also that notion of, are you trying to break out of the echo chamber and reach into other groups? So who? So I would try to prioritize internally who you think would be the most important new stakeholders to try to engage with, and then think about whether or not you do need an external to break into those or not, or whether there's people within the board that can help facilitate those relationships. Kelly might be able to help with the tribes, or have a good idea of who would be the right person to connect with the tribes. Liza Jane might have a good one with, the ranching community, and you could probably use your board to help create those connections before it kind of gets out to a consultant, but also consultants and outside people have their skill set too. So I would say, maybe make a goal of trying to reach out to 3 new stakeholders that might not be in the echo chamber, and figure out who those would be that would be the most valuable to OWEB's near-term strategic plan.
Okay, thank you for that feedback. I think Dan had his hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. I know we're down to 5 minutes. I'll keep it short. Yeah, in response to your thoughts around standing up an external advisory committee, I feel like this committee, my sensing is we need to sort of bring, our thoughts together around a vision on where are we heading. And I could see it being duplicative or, I would question the efficiency and the value add. Not to say that it wouldn't be a critical tool at some point. I think it's about the timing. And I like how Molly kind of couched it. Going back though, feedback on the training, I am really curious. We devoted a good amount of time as an OEB board and staff to go through that training. And I, for one, found one of the greatest values from that work with Eco Northwest was really around hearing and listening to individual board members and staff tell their story, and perhaps a little less around the structured kind of classroom material. And I had a similar reaction when we did a DEI session with our my agency's regional leadership team meeting, where the two instructors, who were fantastic, kind of brought a lot of classroom material in. And while that was good, it filled, the bulk of the time, and it really didn't allow for that interactive time. So just wanted to share from my perspective, I really value that space that Eco Northwest provided in being able to have board members and staff have a dialogue, tell each other stories, listen to that and learn from that. That was as instructive to me as was the course material, if you will. Thanks.
Bruce, you have your hand up.
Other than dittoing what Dan and Molly just said, I have nothing on this issue. I did have a good of the order request at the end of the meeting, so whenever we're there, I'd like to make a request. Are we there?
I think we're there.
I think we're there. I have somewhat of a hard stop at the top of the hour. So okay. Eric or I see Courtney's on the call. Maybe you can bring us home.
I don't know if everybody can see this, but April, particularly in January of 2019, we all received a not for public distribution, our board contact information, mailing addresses, emails, phone numbers. I looked at it. I was trying to look up something for Jamie the other day, and I realized that 9 of the members are not forgotten but gone on the most up-to-date list that we have. So if it'd be possible to get a new not for public distribution letter or with contact information, that would help. There's also an org chart that came out at the same time for staff, but I know that's somewhat in flux. Maybe you want to wait on that, but that's was also helpful.
Great. Thank you. Well, to be respectful of your time, one of the chairs want to end the meeting, co-chairs want to end the meeting, and then we will talk to you all soon. So thank you.
Kelly, be my guest. And then I'll wrap it up. Yeah.
Thanks, Dan. Thanks everyone for your time today and for the great dialogue. I think this was a really good meeting of the committee, and we'll see you all again soon.
Yeah,
Bye.
echo that.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
folks. Really excited to be your co-chair. Take care.
Thank
and
you.
have a great day.
Bye.
Have a great day, everybody.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.